Non-priority guest. That's what the place card said. Printed on linen card stock in the same elegant calligraphy as every other card at my sister's wedding. 200 guests milling through a grand ballroom. Champagne flutes catching the light from crystal chandeliers. And I was standing by the seating chart holding the only card with a label beneath the name. My mother appeared at my elbow, smelled like Chanel No. 5, and whispered, "That means no seat at the family table, honey. Don't make a fuss." What my family didn't know was that the $10,000 check in the gift envelope wasn't just a present. It was 6 months of skipped lunches and secondhand coats. And what I did next changed every holiday, every phone call, and every assumption they'd ever made about the quiet one. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. My name is Waverly. I'm 31, and this is the story of a wedding, a place card, and the moment I stopped begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Let me take you back to 6 months before the wedding, when I still believed that showing up and showing love would be enough. Growing up in the Ashford house meant understanding the hierarchy before you could spell it. My father, Douglas, retired early from insurance brokerage and filled his days with golf and silence. My mother, Patricia, ran the household like a campaign headquarters. Every holiday card curated, every dinner party flawless, every family photo staged for maximum impression. Then there was Garrett, my older brother, corporate lawyer, firm handshake, the kind of man who introduced himself with his title before his name. And Meredith, the youngest, marketing director at 27, engagement ring from Tiffany's at 26, and the undisputed center of Patricia's universe since the day she was born. I was the middle, the filler paragraph between two headliners. Our living room told the story better than I ever could. Meredith's pageant trophies lined the mantel, 12 of them, polished monthly. Garrett's Georgetown law diploma hung in a mahogany frame above the piano in my things. My college graduation photo sat on a side table wedged behind a ceramic vase Patricia had picked up in Tuscany. I moved it to the front once. By the next morning, it was behind the vase again. I worked as a school counselor at a public high school, a job I loved with my whole chest. I spent my days talking teenagers through panic attacks and family crisis and college applications, and I was good at it. Last spring, the district named me Counselor of the Year. I texted a photo of the plaque to our family group chat. Patricia sent a heart emoji. Garrett left it on red. Meredith never opened the message. That was the thing about the Ashfords. Love wasn't something they gave freely. It was allocated. And I'd learned early that my share was whatever was left over. Meredith announced her engagement on a Sunday in October. A FaceTime call with all 4 Ashfords on screen and Connor Bradley, her fiancé, grinning beside her with a 3-carat Tiffany solitaire catching the light. Connor came from money, old money. His family owned commercial real estate across 3 states, and his mother, Helen, hosted charity galas the way other women hosted book clubs. Patricia cried. Actually cried. "My baby girl," she kept saying, dabbing her eyes with a linen napkin. Douglas raised his coffee mug in a toast. Garrett said, "About time, Mayor." I said, "Congratulations, I meant it. The wedding would be held at Whitmore Estate, a 5-star resort property an hour north of the city, the kind of venue with a stone chapel and a ballroom with 30-foot ceilings and a price tag that could cover a year of my rent." Patricia had already started a shared Pinterest board before the call ended. In the weeks that followed, I asked Meredith how I could help. I called twice, texted 3 times. Each reply was the same polite deflection. Just show up and wear something nice. No task, no role, no involvement, like I was being managed, not included. But I wanted to do something. I wanted to prove to her, to all of them, that I showed up, that I poured, that I was family in every way that mattered. So I started saving. I cut my lunches to leftovers from dinner. I skipped my gym membership. I stopped buying new clothes. 6 months of quiet sacrifice until I had $10,000 in a certified check, sealed in a craft paper envelope with a handwritten card that said, "For your new beginning." I told myself this gift would show them my heart was bigger than my paycheck. I was wrong about what it would show them. The bridal party was announced in February. A group photo on Meredith's Instagram with 6 women in matching silk chiffon blush dresses, $400 each, arms linked, champagne glasses raised. Her college roommate, her sorority sisters, 2 colleagues from the agency. Not one of them shared her last name. I saw the post before anyone told me, scrolled past it on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the school parking lot holding a granola bar. I'd packed to save money for that check. My thumb hovered over the comment section. I didn't type anything. That night, I texted Meredith. Hey, saw the bridal party post. Looks beautiful. Was I considered for bridesmaid? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I wanted to keep it to my closest circle. You understand, right? Closest circle. Her sister wasn't in her closest circle. I called Patricia, hoping for, I don't know, some indignation on my behalf. Maybe some maternal instinct kicking in. Instead, I got, "Don't make this about you, honey. Meredith has her reasons. She said it the way she always did, sweet enough to sound loving, firm enough to shut me down." So I swallowed it. Told myself I was overreacting. Told myself bridesmaids were just a formality, that what mattered was being there for my sister's day. The next week, Meredith posted fitting photos, the girls in their blush silk giggling, Moed on a silver tray in the background. She tagged every single bridesmaid by name. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't in the frame. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that the seating chart I'd glimpsed on Patricia's laptop didn't have my name at the family table. But I wasn't ready to hear it yet. I helped anyway. That's what people pleasers do. We help even when nobody asks. And then we wonder why nobody thanks us. 3 weeks before the wedding, the custom napkin vendor shipped to the wrong address. Meredith was in a meeting. Patricia was at a hair appointment. Garrett didn't answer his phone. So I drove 2 hours round trip on a Wednesday evening after a full day of work. A day that included talking a sophomore down from a panic attack in the girls' bathroom and sitting through a 3-hour IEP meeting to pick up 400 monogrammed cocktail napkins from a warehouse in the next county. When I got to Patricia's house and carried the boxes inside, she was on FaceTime with Meredith. "Everything's handled, sweetheart. Don't you worry about a thing." She didn't mention me. Not to Meredith. Not to the caterer she called next. Not to Aunt Laura when she stopped by that weekend. The narrative was always the same. Meredith planned everything herself. A week later, Garrett called, "Hey, can you spot me $200 for the bachelor party? I'll get you back." I sent it through Venmo before I finished my morning coffee. He never paid me back. He never mentioned it again. That evening, I sat in my Honda Civic in Patricia's driveway after dropping off the final centerpiece samples, eating a $6 deli sandwich for dinner because I was saving every spare cent for that $10,000 check. Through the kitchen window, I could see Patricia and Meredith laughing over wine, flipping through a seating chart on a tablet. I went inside to say goodnight, glanced at the screen. My name wasn't at table 1. "Oh, that's not final yet," Patricia said, angling the tablet away. "Don't worry about it. I should have worried." The rehearsal dinner was held at a private dining room downtown, the kind of place with a 12-page wine list and waiters who introduced themselves by first name. I wore a charcoal sheath dress I'd bought on clearance at Nordstrom Rack. It was the nicest thing I owned. I arrived on time. The main table ran the length of the room. Douglas and Patricia on one end, Meredith and Connor on the other, Garrett and his girlfriend in the middle, flanked by Connor's parents and his brother. 12 seats, every one of them spoken for. I was directed to the overflow table, a four-top near the kitchen door, alongside 2 of Patricia's tennis friends and a distant cousin's wife I'd met exactly once. "There weren't enough chairs at the main table," Patricia explained when I found her in the hallway. She straightened my collar like I was 12. "You understand, sweetie?" At the main table, a Sumire was pouring my way. At mine, the waiter set down a carafe of house wine. I watched them through the dinner, Patricia glowing, touching Meredith's arm, Garrett making Connor's brother laugh. Douglas quiet but present in a way he never seemed to be with me. At one point, Helen Bradley, Connor's mother, a silver-haired woman with a firm handshake and the kind of posture that suggested decades of knowing exactly who she was, leaned toward Patricia and said something I couldn't hear. Patricia laughed and waved a hand in my direction. Oh, Waverly prefers quieter settings. I saw Helen glance at me, then at the overflow table, then back at Patricia. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. And near the seating chart display, the wedding planner, a woman named Simone Reeves, caught my eye, held it for half a second, and looked away, fast, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. 3 days before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Hey, heads up. The dress code for family-adjacent guests is cocktail, not formal. Don't want you to feel overdressed. Family adjacent. I read it 3 times. Family adjacent, not family adjacent to family, like a parking structure next to a building, related by proximity, not by belonging. I'd already bought a navy formal dress, $180, which was more than I spent on clothes. In a typical year, I'd picked it carefully. Imagine standing beside my sister in photos, looking like I belonged in the same frame as her. I typed back, I follow the family dress code. The reply came fast. Relax. It's just a label. Don't overthink it. Just a label. Everything about my place in this family was just a label. Don't overthink it. The Ashford motto for anyone who noticed the cracks. I messaged Garrett looking for some backup. He responded in seconds. Just go with it. You know how Mirror gets before events. Classic Garrett. Always smoothing the surface, never checking what was underneath. That night, Meredith posted an Instagram story. Her bridesmaids at a fitting, draped in custom Marquesa silk, $1,200 per dress, laughing in a sunlit studio with exposed brick and fresh peas on every surface. The caption read, My girls. I screenshotted the family-adjacent text. Something in me, instinct maybe, or just years of pattern recognition, told me to keep it. I didn't know what for. I didn't know I was collecting evidence. I just knew that the word adjacent felt like a door closing, and I wanted proof it had ever been open. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 6. I ironed my cocktail dress, the one Meredith approved, packed the craft paper envelope with the $10,000 check into my handbag, and drove 50 minutes to Whitmore Estate under a sky that couldn't decide between sun and clouds. The venue was staggering. Stone columns, manicured gardens, a fountain the size of my apartment's living room, valet and black vests, a string quartet warming up somewhere beyond the hedge. I walked to the bridal suite with a small arrangement of white roses I'd bought at a roadside stand. The door was guarded by a woman in a headset. "Bridal party only," she said. "I'm the bride's sister." She checked her clipboard, ran her finger down the list, checked again. "I'm sorry, you're not on the access list. I called Patricia." She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice airy and distracted. "Oh, honey, Meredith wants the suite just for her girls this morning. Go get yourself a coffee. It'll be fine. It'll be fine." The Ashford Lullaby. So I sat in the resort lobby alone, holding my roses and my envelope, surrounded by $500 floral arrangements and the scent of diptyque candles, and watched through a wall of windows as my family filed into the bridal suite without me. Patricia with garment bags, Garrett with a bottle of champagne, Douglas with his hands in his pockets looking like he always did, present but absent. Simone Reeves, the wedding planner, walked through the lobby carrying a box of place cards. She saw me on the leather sofa, stopped, opened her mouth, closed it, and then said quietly, "The ceremony starts at 4. Her eyes held something I didn't understand yet. Guilt, maybe, or pity. I thanked her and went back to my coffee. 2 hours later, I'd walk into that ballroom holding an envelope I'd saved 6 months for. I'd walk out holding something worth far more. The ceremony was held in the estate's garden. White chairs arranged on manicured grass, an archway dripping with peas and eucalyptus, 200 guests settling in under a canopy of old oaks. It looked like a page from a magazine. It was supposed to feel like a dream. I found my seat in the 5th row, behind Connor's extended family, behind Meredith's colleagues, behind people I'd never met, who apparently ranked higher in my sister's universe than the woman who'd driven 2 hours to pick up her napkins. The front row was reserved for immediate family: Douglas, Patricia, Garrett, and Garrett's girlfriend. 4 chairs. I counted them twice. There was no 5th chair. There was no gap where one had been removed. The row had been planned for 4 since the beginning. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give it that. Meredith floated down the aisle in a cathedral-length Vera Wang, and for a moment, just a moment, she looked like the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Connor waited for her with wet eyes and steady hands. Meredith read her vows from a leather-bound journal. She talked about the family who shaped me, and her eyes traveled to Patricia, to Garrett, to Douglas. Not once did they travel to row 5. Not once did they find me. When Connor said, "Family is everything," I saw Helen Bradley, his mother, seated in row 2 in a tasteful navy suit, glance in my direction just for a second. Then she looked at Patricia, and her jaw tightened by a fraction. I applauded with everyone else. I smiled. I held my handbag, the one with the $10,000 check, against my hip and thought, 3rd row at the rehearsal, 5th row at the ceremony. I wonder where they'll put me at the reception. I was about to find out, and it would be worse than anything I'd imagined. The reception was in the grand ballroom. 30-foot ceilings, 3 chandeliers, a wall of French doors opening onto a terrace lit with string lights. 200 guests filtered in from the cocktail hour. Champagne warm and laughing, drifting toward the seating chart displayed on an easel draped in ivory linen. I found the display and scanned for my name. Table 1. Family: Douglas, Patricia, Garrett, Garrett's girlfriend. No Waverly. Table 2. Bridal party. Table 3. Close friends. Tables 4 through 12. College friends, colleagues. Connor's fraternity brothers. Table 14. Last on the list, closest to the kitchen doors. Waverly Ashford. Non-priority guest. I read it again. Every other card on that display listed a name. Just a name. Mine was the only one with a classification printed beneath it in small, precise italic. Non-priority, like a shipping label, like a category on a spreadsheet. I picked up the linen place card, held it between 2 fingers. The cardstock was heavy, cream-colored, the same embossed calligraphy as every other card in the room, my name rendered beautifully above a designation that reduced me to cargo. Patricia materialized at my elbow. She smelled like Chanel and champagne. That means no seat at the family table. Honey, don't make a fuss. Okay. She said it the way you'd explain a weather delay to a child. Calm, measured, as if the cruelty were meteorological, regrettable, but beyond anyone's control. I looked at table 14. 2 strangers in their 60s, a couple I'd never seen before, a single-place setting with a smaller menu card. One of the couples caught my eye. The woman smiled politely. "So how do you know the bride?" I held the place card steady. She's my sister. The silence that followed told me everything the card already had. Dinner service began, and with it, the final distinction. At the family table, table 1, a sommelier, in a black vest uncorked bottles of reserved Cabernet. Waiters in crisp white jackets presented the first course, seared scallops on a bed of truffle risotto. The main course followed filet mignon, lobster tail, a sauce that caught the candlelight, laughter, and clinking glasses. Patricia leaned into Meredith's shoulder. Garrett raised his champagne. Douglas ate quietly, content. At table 14, a waiter sat down a plate of chicken breast, dry, unadorned, a side salad with vinaigrette from a squeeze bottle, no wine, a carafe of water. When I glanced at the menu card propped against the centerpiece, a modest arrangement, half the size of the payees on the family table, it read, "Non-priority dining selection." I looked at the waiter. He was young, maybe 22, clearly uncomfortable. "Non-priority tables have a different menu package," he said. He couldn't meet my eyes. Package like I'd booked the economy option at a resort, except I hadn't booked anything. I'd been assigned. I looked across the ballroom at my family. Patricia was laughing at something Garrett said, her diamond brooch catching light from the chandelier. Meredith leaned against Connor, radiant, untouchable. The silk tablecloth at table 1 was ivory. The one beneath my plate was polyester. Nobody looked at table 14. Nobody checked on me. Nobody wondered where the bride's sister was sitting or why she was eating chicken while the family ate lobster, except Helen Bradley from table 2. I caught her watching. She said something quiet to Connor, who shrugged and said something back. She didn't look satisfied with the answer. I reached into my handbag and touched the craft paper envelope. 6 months, skipped lunches, secondhand everything, $10,000 for people who wouldn't spend a chair on me. I put down my fork. I knew what I had to do. I stood up from table 14, folded my napkin once, twice, and placed it beside my untouched chicken. The couple across from me glanced up. I gave them a small nod and walked toward the gift table. It sat along the far wall of the ballroom, draped in white satin, stacked with boxes wrapped in silver and gold. Envelopes of every size tucked between vases of white roses. I found my envelope immediately, craft paper among all that shimmer, plain and honest, the way I'd always been in this family. I picked it up, opened the flap, slid out the certified check, $10,000, made out to Meredith Ashford, and folded it twice, tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket. A few guests near the table noticed. A woman with a champagne flute paused mid-sip. 2 men in suits turned their heads. Then I heard heels, quick, sharp, on the marble floor behind me. "What are you doing?" Patricia's whisper was a hiss. Her fingers closed around my wrist. I looked at her hand, then at her face. Then I reached into my handbag, pulled out the linen place card, and set it on the gift table where the envelope had been. Since I'm just a courtesy, I said, "So, is this?" Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I turned and walked toward the ballroom doors, heels steady on marble. No running, no tears, shoulders back. The way I taught my students to carry themselves when the hallway felt too long and too loud. Behind me, the ballroom had gone quiet. 200 guests, and for the first time all evening, every single one of them was looking at table 14's empty chair, but I was already through the doors. The valet stand was 50 yards from the ballroom entrance. I made it halfway before the clicking started behind me. Heels on stone, fast and uneven. The sound of a woman running in a dress that wasn't designed for running. Waverly. Stop. Meredith. Her Vera Wang gown dragged across the gravel path. The cathedral train collecting dust and small stones. Her face was flushed, her veil askew. Behind her, Patricia and Douglas emerged through the doors, Patricia speed walking. Douglas trailing with his hands at his sides like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Garrett stood in the doorway, champagne glass in hand, watching. "What the hell was that?" Meredith reached me breathless. "You can't just take back a gift. You're embarrassing us." Patricia arrived next, one hand pressed against her Chanel brooch as if holding herself together. "Get back inside right now. That's my wedding in there." Meredith's voice cracked. I opened my car door, a 2019 Honda Civic parked between a BMW and a Mercedes, the cheapest thing in the lot, and turned to face them. "You labeled me non-priority at your wedding. You sat me next to strangers. You served me a different meal. You didn't want me in the bridal suite this morning." I kept my voice level. "The gift was the only thing about me you wanted, so you can understand why I'm taking it back." "You're overreacting," Patricia said. "Am I?" "Then tell me whose idea was non-priority guest." The parking lot went quiet. A valet pretended to check his phone. Patricia looked at Meredith. Meredith looked at the gravel. That's what I thought. I got in the car, pulled the door shut, started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, Meredith standing in a $100,000 wedding dress streaked with dirt. Patricia shouting something I could no longer hear, and Garrett still in the doorway sipping champagne. I drove. At that point, I was sitting in my car in that parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and I kept thinking, was I wrong? Was I the one making a scene? Because that's what they'd trained me to believe for 31 years. Let me ask you this. If someone labeled you non-priority at your own sister's wedding, printed it on a card for everyone to see, would you have stayed or would you have done exactly what I did? Tell me in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, hit subscribe because what happened next is where it gets real. I woke up the next morning to 47 unread messages and 12 missed calls. My apartment was quiet. One bedroom, clean, Matthias, a Trader Joe's mug on the counter, and grocery coupons pinned to the fridge with magnets I'd collected from school field trips. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And on that morning, it felt like the only safe perimeter left. I scrolled through the messages the way you'd scroll through a car wreck. Patricia, 11:47 p.m. You ruined your sister's wedding. I hope you're happy. Garrett, 12:03 a.m. Really, Waverly? Over a seating chart? Call me, Aunt Laura, 7:14 a.m. Your mother is devastated. Please call her. Meredith hadn't texted. Meredith had posted an Instagram story at 1 a.m., a candle-lit photo of her and Connor on the dance floor captioned, "Nothing could ruin this night." The subtext was louder than the music. I sat at my kitchen table with the certified check in front of me. $10,000, my emergency fund, my safety net, the money I'd saved by eating peanut butter sandwiches, and skipping every small pleasure for half a year. I'd almost given it away to a sister who couldn't give me a chair. The doubt crept in the way it always did, quiet, familiar, wearing my mother's voice. Maybe I did overreact. Maybe I should have stayed at table 14, eaten my chicken, smiled through the toasts, and driven home in silence like I'd done at every Ashford event for 31 years. My phone buzzed again, unknown number, a text. "Hi, Waverly. This is Simone Reeves, the wedding planner. I'm sorry about last night. It wasn't my call. If you ever want to talk, here's my number." I stared at the message for a long time. Then, I set the phone face down and went to make coffee. The hardest part of leaving wasn't the walking out. It was waking up and wondering if I just detonated the only family I had. Garrett called on Tuesday evening, 3 days after the wedding. His voice had that careful, modulated quality he used in depositions. Calm, reasonable, designed to make the other person feel like the irrational one. "Hey, let's talk like adults. I'm not taking sides here." He was always not taking sides. Garrett's neutrality was a magic trick. It looked fair from every angle and somehow always landed in his favor. "Mom's a mess," he said. Meredith cried the entire first night of her honeymoon. "You really hurt them." "Wave. They hurt me first. They labeled me. It's a seating chart." He said it the way you'd say it's just a game to a child who lost. Gentle, patronizing, final. It's not that deep. Then why was I the only guest with a classification on my place card? Pause. I heard highway noise in the background. He was calling from his BMW, probably on his commute, fitting this conversation between a client call and a podcast episode. "Look," he said, shifting gears, literally and rhetorically, "what if you just send the check to Meredith with a nice note, an olive branch? Then we can all move past this at Thanksgiving." There it was, the real ask, dressed up as diplomacy. Move past what, exactly? The fact that my own family classified me as non-priority. Waverly. "Did you know about the seating arrangement before the wedding, Garrett?" Silence. 3 seconds. 4. "That's not the point." Which meant yes. "An olive branch only works when both sides stop swinging," I said. His voice dropped the warmth. "Fine. Be stubborn, but don't come crying when you're alone at Thanksgiving." He hung up. I sat in my living room, phone in my lap, and thought, I've been alone at Thanksgiving my whole life. I just didn't have the empty chair to prove it until now. Patricia called on FaceTime. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, damp, the full performance. Behind her, the redecorated living room gleamed, fresh-cut hydrangeas in a Waterford crystal vase, throw pillows arranged with surgical precision, image and substance living in separate zip codes. "I didn't sleep all night," she said. "Your father's blood pressure is up. This is what you've done to us." Every sentence was an arrow aimed at the softest part of me, the part that still wanted to be a good daughter, the part that had spent 31 years trying to earn a spot at the table by being quiet and useful and small. Meredith's honeymoon is supposed to start tomorrow, and she can't even enjoy it because of you. The seating arrangement wasn't my choice. Mom, that money was meant for their future. Waverly, you're punishing your sister over a silly misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? You told me to my face that I didn't have a seat at the family table. I was trying to manage the situation. There were so many guests, 200 guests, and I was the only one labeled non-priority. Her expression shifted. The wounded mother mask slipped, and underneath it was something harder, something I'd seen in glimpses my whole life, but never had the courage to name. You know what? Patricia's voice went flat. Maybe if you'd done more with your life, people would treat you differently. The words landed like a closed fist, not because they were true, but because she'd finally said out loud what she'd been whispering through every overlooked photo, every skipped invitation, every "don't make this about you," the quiet part spoken. I ended the call without responding, set my phone on the counter, pressed my palms flat against the kitchen tile, and breathed. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, something final. That night, I pulled out every family photo album I had. I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, lamp casting a yellow circle around me, and I flipped through 2 decades of Ashford holidays, vacations, and milestones. I was looking for something evidence maybe that I'd been loved the way I remembered that the warmth hadn't always been a performance. Here's what I found instead. Christmas 2016. Patricia, Meredith, and Garrett in matching red sweaters by the tree. I was in the background carrying plates from the kitchen. Christmas 2019. Group photo in front of the fireplace. I wasn't in it. I'd been asked to take it. Garrett's law school graduation. A framed 5x7 on the mantel. My college graduation. That small photo behind the Tuscan vase. Every picture told the same story. I was in the margins or behind the camera or missing entirely. I opened my phone. My thumb hovered over Meredith's name. I started typing. Maybe I went too far. Then I stopped. Pulled up the screenshot from 3 weeks ago. Family adjacent. Looked at the place card I'd kept in my handbag, still sitting on my nightstand like a small monument to everything wrong with us. Non-priority guest, linen cardstock, beautiful penmanship, my name above a demotion. I deleted the apology draft letter by letter. My phone buzzed. Simone Reeves again. I know this isn't my business, but I have something you should see. Can we meet? I stared at the ceiling. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's television. I didn't know what Simone had, but something in me, the same instinct that made me screenshot that text, the same instinct that made me keep that place card, told me it was the answer to every question I'd been too afraid to ask. I texted back, when and where? We met at a small cafe on the east side, reclaimed wood tables, exposed brick. The kind of place where every latte has a fern drawn in foam. Simone was already there when I arrived, sitting in the corner with a laptop open and a cup she hadn't touched. She looked like a woman about to cross a professional line and knew it. I've been doing weddings for 12 years, she said as I sat down. I've seen family drama, passive-aggressive toasts, drunk uncles, exes showing up uninvited. But what they did to you was deliberate, and I can't stay quiet about it. She turned the laptop toward me. Email 1. Meredith to Simone sent 3 weeks before the wedding. My sister Waverly is on the guest list, but she's not priority. Please seat her at the back. Non-priority package, reduced menu, no wine pairing. Email 2. Simone to Meredith. Just to confirm, this is the bride's sister. Usually immediate family is seated at table 1. Email 3. Meredith to Simone. I know what I want. She's a courtesy invite. Handle it. I read each one twice. My hands were steady. My chest was not. There's more, Simone said quietly. She pulled up a text thread, a message Patricia had sent to Meredith, which Meredith had forwarded to Simone for context. Don't worry about Waverly. She'll sit there quietly. She always does. She always does. I sat there in that cafe, afternoon light cutting through the window, a fern-topped latte going cold between my hands, and I read my mother's words about me. The way you'd read a doctor's diagnosis with the grim clarity of someone who finally has a name for the pain. I'm sorry, Simone said. I shook my head. Don't be. This is the first time in 31 years I don't feel crazy. I drove home with Simone's emails saved to my phone and printed copies in a manila folder on the passenger seat. The cafe was 20 minutes from my apartment, and I spent every one of those minutes in silence. No radio, no podcast, no noise at all. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and opened 2 years of family group texts. With Simone's evidence as the lens, everything looked different. Not new, just finally in focus. April of last year, Garrett's girlfriend's birthday dinner. Forgot to mention it, but it's tonight at Marchette's, 7:00 p.m. I got the text at 6:45. By the time I arrived, they were already on dessert. Thanksgiving. Patricia emailed the seating chart to the planning committee, Meredith and Garrett. I found out about my assigned dish, green bean casserole every year, the one nobody touched, through a forwarded message 3 days before. Christmas, the family photo I remembered, the one taken while I was in the kitchen rinsing plates. Nobody called me. Nobody waited. I wrote it all down in a notebook, blue ink on yellow legal paper, not to build a case against them. I'd spent my whole career teaching students how to identify patterns in their own lives, how to distinguish between a bad day and a bad dynamic. This wasn't a bad day. This was architecture. My family had built a structure with no room for me inside it, and I'd spent 3 decades furnishing the hallway. Simone's emails were the hard evidence. The pattern was the whole picture. Somewhere between the second and third page of notes, I stopped writing and put the pen down. I realized I didn't need my family to admit they were wrong. I needed to stop telling myself they were right. I closed the notebook and placed it on top of the manila folder. Then I made dinner, a real dinner with a glass of wine and a plate. I actually sat down to eat for the first time in months. Helen Bradley called the next afternoon. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was unmistakable. Measured Southern warm in the way that old silver is warm with a weight to it. Waverly, this is Helen, Connor's mother. I hope I'm not overstepping. Not at all, I'll be honest with you. She paused, and I heard the creak of a chair. Her sunroom, maybe, the one Connor had mentioned once, full of orchids and natural light. I saw what happened at the reception, and it's been sitting with me ever since. She told me what she'd witnessed, how she'd asked Patricia at the rehearsal dinner why I was at the overflow table, how Patricia had said I preferred quiet settings, how Helen had watched me at table 14 during the reception and known the way any mother would know that something was deeply wrong. And after you left, Helen continued, I asked Connor. He told me Meredith said it was a mix-up, a miscommunication with the planner. It wasn't. I know that now. Connor confronted Meredith about it after the honeymoon. She told him, You chose that table. I closed my eyes. Even after everything, the lie still stung, a fresh coat of paint on an old wound. Connor doesn't know who to believe, Helen said carefully. But I raised my boy to value honesty, and if your sister lied to him about something this straightforward, I worry about what else she might not be telling him. The silence between us held something I hadn't expected from a stranger. Solidarity. You don't owe anyone an apology for refusing to be invisible, sweetheart. I thanked her, meant it more than she knew. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap and realized something had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. The truth had witnesses now. I laid everything out on my kitchen table like a counselor building a case file. Simone's emails, Patricia's text, Helen's account of Meredith's lie to Connor, the screenshot of family adjacent, the place card I'd kept. 5 pieces, 5 moments of proof that what had happened at that wedding wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding or me overreacting. It was a plan executed by people who assumed I'd absorb it the way I'd absorbed everything before, quietly, gratefully, without making a fuss. I didn't want to destroy my family. I want to be clear about that. I didn't want a dramatic unraveling or a scorched earth take-on or a viral post. I wanted one thing, for the truth to be visible, for the people who'd spent 31 years writing me into the margins to sit in a room and look at their own handwriting. So I made a decision. I'd call Patricia, ask for a family meeting, Sunday brunch, her house, all of us. I'd give them one chance to acknowledge what they'd done, one honest conversation, face-to-face, no texting, no FaceTime filters. And if they lied, if they spun it, minimized it, turned it back on me the way they always did, I'd put the emails on the table and let the truth do what the truth does. I called Patricia. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright with cautious optimism. "I'd like to have a conversation," I said. "All of us, Sunday brunch, your house, oh, honey." Relief flooded her tone. Of course, I'll make your favorite, that quiche you love." Well, sort everything out. She thought I was coming to surrender. I could hear it in the tilt of her voice, the speed of her. Yes, the prodigal daughter crawling home. I hung up and looked at the manila folder on the counter, pressed my hand flat against it, felt the weight of the pages inside. My mother thought I was coming back to apologize. She had no idea I was coming back with receipts. Right before that Sunday brunch, I stood in my kitchen holding that manila folder and thought I could just let this go. I could accept my place at table 14 for the rest of my life and call it peace. But then I read Patricia's text one more time. She'll sit there quietly. She always does. And I decided, not this time. If you've ever had a moment where you stopped being quiet for the people who never spoke up for you, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments and stay with me, because what happened at that brunch? No one saw it coming. Sunday morning, the Ashford house looked the way it always looked when company was expected. Hydrangeas in the foyer, the good china on the dining table, fresh squeezed orange juice in a crystal pitcher. Patricia had been cooking since dawn, and the air smelled like quiche and performance. Everyone was there. Douglas sat at the head of the table with the newspaper folded beside his plate, doing what he did best, occupying space without filling it. Garrett leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. Meredith sat between Connor and an empty chair, mine, with her hand resting on Connor's forearm in a display of marital unity, so deliberate it might as well have been choreographed. Connor looked uncomfortable. His jaw was tight and he kept glancing at Meredith. The way you glance at someone, you're still deciding whether to trust. I arrived at 10 sharp manila folder in my bag, weight against my hip. Patricia met me at the door with a hug, warm, lingering, theatrical. "I'm so glad you came, honey. Let's put all this behind us. Good to see you being mature about this," Garrett said without looking up from his phone. Meredith offered a tight-lipped smile. "Hey." I sat down, spread the napkin across my lap, rested my bag on the floor beside my chair, the folder inside it. Patricia served the quiche, poured the juice, arranged everything with the precision of a woman who believed that if the table looked right, the family would too. Connor turned to me. "Hey, Waverly, I'm sorry about the seating thing. Meredith told me it was a mix-up." I looked at him, then at Meredith. She was suddenly very interested in her quiche. Everyone at that table thought I'd come to surrender. They were already rehearsing their gracious acceptance. Patricia opened with the script I could have written in my sleep. "Waverly, we love you. Family forgives. That's what we do." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Let's talk about how we move forward. Move forward. The Ashford euphemism for you, apologize. We forget, nothing changes." "I think Waverly knows she went a little far at the reception," Garrett said, setting down his fork with the casual authority of a man accustomed to controlling rooms. For the record, taking back a gift at a public event could technically be considered theft of a conditional gift in certain jurisdictions. I'm not saying it is, but Garrett, I held up a hand. Don't. Meredith jumped in, her voice pitched to wounded. I planned that wedding for an entire year, and the only thing anyone remembers is my sister grabbing an envelope off the gift table. Patricia nodded. Just say you're sorry, return the check, and we'll forget it happened. Clean slate. I let the silence sit for a moment, let them think they were winning. Then I set my fork down, wiped my hands on the napkin, and said, before I say anything, I want to ask one question. The table stilled. Even Douglas looked up from his plate. Whose idea was it to label me non-priority guest? Quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone in the room knows the answer and no one wants to say it. Patricia looked at Meredith. Meredith looked at Douglas. Douglas looked at the newspaper he'd already pretended to read. It was a seating category, Meredith said finally. The planner suggested it. The lie landed on the table like a plate dropped from height. Clean, sharp, unmistakable. I gave them one chance to tell the truth. They chose the lie. So, I reached for my bag. I opened the manila folder and placed 3 printed pages on the table, one at a time, between the quiche platter and the crystal picture. The first page, Meredith's email to Simone Reeves, sent 3 weeks before the wedding. My sister Waverly is on the guest list, but she's not priority. Non-priority package, reduced menu, no wine pairing, and then when Simone asked for clarification, she's a courtesy invite. Handle it. The second page, Simone's reply, just to confirm this is the bride's sister and Meredith's response. I know what I want. The third page, the text message from Patricia to Meredith, forwarded to Simone for context, 6 words. She'll sit there quietly. She always does. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I just said the planner didn't suggest it. Meredith, you instructed her and Mom. You co-signed it. Meredith's face went white. Patricia's hand froze in the air, her coffee cup suspended between the saucer and her lips. Connor reached across the table and picked up the first page. Read it. Turn to the second. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. You told me it was a mix-up, he said to Meredith. His voice was low and controlled, but the edges were fraying. It was, these emails are out of context. The context is right here. Connor held up the page. You called your own sister a courtesy invite. Meredith's eyes welled. You don't understand. I was under so much pressure. Connor set the paper down, pushed his chair back, and stood. I need some air. He walked through the kitchen and out the back door. The screen door slapped shut behind him. Meredith stared at the empty chair. Garrett scrambling. Where did you even get these? This is a breach of, it's an email from a vendor your sister hired. I said, there's no breach, just the truth. Patricia was the first to try to rebuild the wall. Those emails don't mean what you think. I was just trying to manage. Manage what? I said, me? You managed me into table 14 with a different menu next to people who didn't know I was the bride's sister. I didn't. It wasn't like that. Meredith wanted a certain aesthetic for the evening, and Douglas's voice cut through. Quiet, tired, but present. Fully present for the first time in years. Patricia, is this true? She turned to him, flustered. Of course not. Well, not like that, not the way she's making it sound. You wrote, she'll sit there quietly. I can see the text right here. Meredith broke. Not gracefully, desperately. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. She was going to sit there for 2 hours and go home like she always does. Nobody was supposed to notice that sentence. Every head at the table turned toward her. Even Garrett stopped chewing. Meredith had just confirmed everything. The planning, the deliberateness, the assumption that I would absorb it silently. Not a misunderstanding, not a vendor error, a calculated decision built on the certainty that I wouldn't fight back. Through the screen door, I could see Connor on the patio. He'd heard every word. His face, lit by the morning sun, was stone. Garrett tried one last pivot. Everyone, just calm down. This is getting blown out of proportion, I said. That's what you told me on the phone. It's your only line, Garrett. He opened his mouth, closed it. Enough. I pushed my chair back and stood. The quiche sat in the center of the table, untouched now. A napkin had fallen to the floor. Patricia's crystal juice picture cast a prism of light across the printed emails, across my mother's own words, across the debris of a family that had never been as beautiful as it arranged itself to look. I stood at the head of that table, my mother's good china beneath my fingertips, and I looked at each of them in turn. Patricia, mascara starting to track. Meredith staring at Connor's empty chair. Garrett, jaw tight, phone forgotten. Douglas, hands folded, eyes on me. Finally, fully on me. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. I'm here because I needed you to see what you did. Not through my tears, through your own words. Nobody spoke. I'm keeping the check, not because I need the money, but because it was never just a gift. It was 6 months of my life saved by a woman who skipped lunches and wore last year's coat for people who wouldn't save her a chair. Patricia made a sound, something between a gasp and a word. I'm going home now, and I need you to hear this. I took a breath. I love you. But I won't sit at table 14 again. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not anywhere. Waverly, please, Meredith whispered. If you want me in your life, It'll be because you want me, not because you need what I bring to the gift table. I picked up the manila folder, put it in my bag, and walked toward the front door, down the hallway, past the framed photos, Meredith's pageant trophies, Garrett's diploma, and there, half hidden behind the Tuscan vase, my small graduation picture. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Behind me, Patricia was crying. Real tears or rehearsed ones, I couldn't tell anymore. And that was the point. When you can't tell the difference between your mother's grief and her performance, it's time to stop being the audience. I drove home in silence, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. The truth moves faster than spin. I learned that in the week after the brunch, Helen Bradley called me Monday evening. Connor had told her everything. The emails, Meredith's outburst, the lie about the seating being a mix-up. Helen was, in her own Southern way, livid. "I shared the situation with our family at Sunday dinner," she said. Not gossip. Helen didn't gossip. She informed. The Bradleys value integrity above all else. And if a woman treats her own sister like surplus inventory, it raises questions about how she'll treat a marriage. Word spread through the Bradley network the way truth always does, steadily, irreversibly, without volume but with weight. Connor's brother called Meredith cold. Connor's father stopped returning Patricia's calls. The honeymoon was canceled or postponed, as Meredith told Instagram, just rescheduling for something even better. But the silence on Connor's account told the real story. On the Ashford side, the fractures were spreading, too. Aunt Laura, Patricia's own sister, called me that Wednesday. She'd heard Patricia's version first, then mine, then Simone's emails, which I'd shared with her permission. "I always knew Patricia played favorites," Laura said quietly. "I just never said it out loud." Then she told me something that made my stomach drop. Patricia had been calling extended family all week with a different narrative. Waverly had psychological issues. Waverly refused to participate in the wedding. Waverly was unstable. My mother wasn't just spinning the story. She was rewriting me, but the emails existed. Simone existed. Helen existed. And one by one, the relatives Patricia called started calling me. Not with accusations, but with apologies. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have said something. I'm sorry." Helen sent me a handwritten card through the mail. Cream stationery, blue ink. Family isn't a label on a place card. Dear, it's how you treat people when no one's ranking them. I pinned it to my refrigerator right next to the grocery coupons. It looked like it belonged there. Patricia's campaign lasted 8 days before it collapsed. She called everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, even Douglas's old college roommate. The message was consistent and rehearsed. Waverly had made a scene at the wedding, stolen back a gift, and humiliated the family. Waverly was struggling emotionally. Waverly needed help. For the first 48 hours, it worked. A few cousins sent me stiff, distant texts. Uncle Richard left a voicemail that started with, "I'm not taking sides, but," which, in my experience, always preceded someone taking a side. Then Aunt Laura started forwarding the emails. She didn't do it dramatically. She simply replied to Patricia's family-wide email thread, the one Patricia had titled "Checking In About Waverly," with Simone's emails attached and a single line, "Has anyone seen these?" The thread went quiet for 6 hours. Then it erupted. Cousins who texted me with judgment were now texting me with shock. Uncle Richard called back and said, "I owe you an apology." Patricia's friend from tennis sent a message meant for someone else. "Did you know about the seating thing?" Good Lord. And accidentally copied me. Garrett called, and for the first time, his voice carried no polish. "You're destroying this family." "No, Garrett, I'm just not covering for it anymore." He went quiet. Then, unexpectedly, the truth fell out of him. "I told Meredith I'd get you to return the check. She was going to connect me with Connor's firm for a referral. I needed that favor." There it was. His loyalty had never been to the family or to Meredith's feelings. It was transactional, a referral, a career play. His concern for me had a price tag on it, just like everything else in this family. "You're not protecting anyone," I said. "You're protecting the version of this family that benefits you." He hung up. Connor called me 2 weeks after the brunch. It was late 9, and his voice carried the flat exhaustion of a man who'd been arguing in circles. "I want you to know this isn't just about the seating chart." He told me what had happened in the weeks since. The emails had cracked something open. Once Connor started looking at Meredith's stories with fresh eyes, the pattern emerged. Small lies told casually about money and friends and plans. Nothing catastrophic on its own, but stacked together, they formed a wall he couldn't see through anymore. The place card wasn't the problem, he said. It was the pattern. He and Meredith were in couples counseling now, his condition for staying. Meredith had resisted at first, called it an overreaction, said the same words she'd said at the brunch. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. The therapist apparently had not agreed. 3 days later, Meredith called me. Her voice was different, stripped of the polish, the performative confidence, but it wasn't yet the voice of someone who understood. "Connor's making me do therapy because of what you did. Connor's asking you to do therapy because of what you did, Meredith." Silence. "I didn't think it was that big of a deal," she said. "Smaller now, closer to honest maybe, but still circling the edges rather than walking through the center." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." She was quiet for a long time. In the background, I could hear the echo of an empty condo, the honeymoon luggage still unpacked, probably, and the framed wedding photo Connor had turned face down on the shelf. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I'll tell you this. I'm not the one you need to be asking." The letter arrived on a Thursday. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Douglas's tight, careful print, the kind that comes from a man who measures his words because he spent a lifetime not using enough of them. It was written on yellow legal pad paper in black ink, not typed, not emailed, handwritten. Because as he explained in the second paragraph, email felt too easy for what I need to say. He didn't make excuses. He said he'd seen the seating chart on Patricia's laptop before the wedding and asked about it. Patricia told him it wasn't finalized. He chose to believe her because believing her was easier than fighting. He said he'd watched me sit at overflow tables and disappear into kitchens at holidays for years. And he told himself it was just how things worked. He said he was wrong. I should have been the one to pull that place card off the table. He wrote, "I'm sorry I made you do it yourself." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't promise that everything would change overnight. But at the bottom of the second page, in handwriting that shook slightly at the edges, he wrote that he'd started seeing a counselor on his own. Not because anyone asked him to, because he'd realized that 30 years of silence wasn't neutrality, it was failure. I cried reading that letter, first time since the wedding. I sat on my couch with yellow legal paper in my hands and let myself feel the full weight of it. The grief of a daughter who'd always known her father saw her, and the grief of understanding that seeing wasn't enough, not without the courage to speak. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I folded it carefully and placed it in my nightstand drawer beside the place card. Some things you keep because they hurt, and some things you keep because they're the first honest thing you've received in years. 3 months passed. The world didn't end. That surprised me more than it should have. My apartment, the one bedroom with the coupons on the fridge and the Trader Joe's mug, started to feel different. Not bigger, just warmer, like something in the walls had relaxed once I stopped carrying the tension of a family that didn't know how to hold me. I deposited the $10,000 check into a savings account. Not a revenge fund, an emergency fund, a promise I made to myself that I would never again be in a position where I needed my family's approval to feel safe. At work, the principal called me into her office in October. The district had approved a new position, head counselor. She offered it to me first. I took it, and the irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career teaching teenagers how to set boundaries, how to recognize unhealthy patterns, how to stop shrinking themselves to fit spaces that were never built for them. It just took me 31 years to take my own advice. I went no contact with Patricia and Meredith, Not a dramatic declaration. I didn't block them or send a manifesto. I just stopped answering. The door wasn't locked. It was just closed. Garrett called once. A formal apology. The words right. The tone hollow. He'd heard from Aunt Laura that the extended family was distancing from Patricia, and suddenly remorse became convenient. I thanked him, kept it short. Douglas, I saw once. We met for coffee at a diner near his house. Just the two of us. No Patricia, no script. The conversation was hard, lots of silence, but the silence was different from before. It was the silence of two people trying, not two people avoiding. Helen Bradley invited me to Thanksgiving. You'll always have a seat at our table, she said. I hadn't decided yet, but I noticed the word she used. Seat, not label, not category. Seat. I bought myself a thin silver bracelet that week. Had one word engraved on the inside. Enough. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't a brand anyone would recognize, but I chose it for myself, and that made it the most valuable thing I owned. There's a bench in the park near my school under a sycamore tree that drops leaves the size of dinner plates every October. I'd been eating my lunch there since I started the job. 5 years of sandwiches and silence and watching kids throw footballs on the grass. On a Friday afternoon in late October, I sat on that bench and opened my phone to the drafts folder. The unsent message to Meredith was still there, the one I'd started typing the night I almost caved. Maybe I went too far. I selected it, deleted it, watched the cursor blink in the empty field, then closed the app. I didn't feel anger, didn't feel triumph. I felt the clean, quiet relief of someone who'd put down a bag they'd been carrying so long they'd forgotten it had weight. I spent a long time sitting there watching a family, mother, father, 2 kids, set up a picnic on the grass nearby. They bickered about where to spread the blanket. The dad burned his tongue on soup from a thermos. The little girl spilled apple juice on her brother's shoe, and everybody laughed. It was imperfect and ordinary, and nobody at that picnic was earning their seat. My phone buzzed. Simone Reeves. Hope you're doing well. My newest client's family just called about seating arrangements for a winter wedding. I told them every guest gets the same table setting, the same menu. Period. No categories. Thought you'd want to know? I smiled. The first real, full, uncomplicated smile in months. I didn't change Simone's career. She changed her own. But maybe what happened to me, what I refused to accept, gave her a reason to draw a line she hadn't drawn before. Ripple effects. You never know which stone starts them. I closed my phone, tilted my face up toward the sycamore, and breathed. I keep the place card in my desk drawer at home, bottom left, beneath a stack of old lesson plans and a broken stapler. I keep meaning to replace. I pulled it out last night, held it under the desk lamp, and looked at it the way you'd look at an old scar. Not with pain, but with the strange respect you developed for the things that changed you. Linen cardstock, cream-colored, elegant calligraphy, the same hand that wrote every other place card at that wedding. Waverly Ashford, and beneath it, in smaller italic non-priority guest, beautiful production quality, impeccable presentation. The Ashfords always knew how to make cruelty look expensive. I didn't tear it up, didn't burn it. I slid it into a journal I keep on my bookshelf. A slim, leather-bound thing I bought myself last month and used it as a bookmark page. 1 Chapter 1. This card was meant to tell me my place. Instead, it marks the moment I chose to leave it. If you've made it this far, and somewhere in your life there's a table 14, a place card with your name on it, and a label underneath that tells you you're less than, you're extra, you're non-priority, I want you to know something. You are not non-priority. You never were. And the people who made you believe that, they weren't labeling your worth. They were revealing their own. I closed the journal and set it on the shelf. Next to it, in a simple black frame, hung my Counselor of the Year plaque, not on a mantelpiece behind a vase, not half hidden in a hallway, front and center, in my own home, on my own wall. My name is Waverly Ashford. I'm 31 years old, and I am nobody's courtesy. So now, I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, if your own family handed you a place card that said you didn't belong, which would you choose? Would you stay and smile, or would you walk away with your self-respect? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you think about your own Table 14, then I think you'll connect with the next story too. Check the description for the link. Thank you for being here.